Ironic about last episode is we talked about the coronavirus, and I may have downplayed it a bit, and I got sick the next day.
And
Yeah, I got sick the next day. I was pretty sick for about a week. I don't know if I had it because they didn't test me. I actually didn't get tested for anything, even though I called and asked. I was fine within 6 days. I did the social distancing and everything, and I was fine, but definitely wasn't very comfortable. But that doesn't change some of my opinions on the whole thing. I will say that the longer the time goes on, I think as could be expected, the issue to it is obviously more people are dying. But I think along with the growth of the disease, there's a new relative perspective that's being taken, that we're either on one extreme end of the spectrum where we really are terrified of this issue, or we're not. So I think that's going to be an interesting viewpoint.
and then you have the whole problem of like preventing this from happening again, right?
Yeah, and once
And I think that's even worse than actually like
once the social distancing issue is, I guess, once it's not mandated anymore, then we do definitely risk having a very vicious second wave, just like we saw in the Spanish flu of 1918.
yeah.
Or I do think that the statistics themselves are very skewed. Actually, I don't think, I know they're very skewed because they're refusing to test large quantities of people. And when you only test people who are at risk of death for the disease, who have a high probability of dying from the disease, then obviously the death rate is going to be very high. I think some statistics claim that the disease itself is claiming around a 5 to 10% death toll, when that's just not factually true if you were to test everyone who had it. And if you were to include everyone who was tested in these meta-analysis studies, then you would have a vastly different outcome than the one that we have right now. So I say still don't be alarmed by numbers that simply don't hold very much weight this early in the pandemic. I hate to say it, but it is still early. It's only been.
No, yeah, it is. And like relaxing social distancing is going to take a long time, right? Because if we just snap right out of it, go back to the way things were, we're going to see, like you said, another huge spike. So
Yeah.
just a gradual release of social distancing would be the best approach.
Yeah, and unless we start some very rigorous blood testing and testing for antibodies, then this is going to be a very, once again, this is all my opinion, but unless we are testing for antibodies and we are seeing who has been symptomatic in the past and just basically built up immunity to the disease, if we could do that in a mass cycle, then we could actually find out who could appropriately go back to work. In fact, we could probably better test or better protect those at risk by knowing who's immune to it. Rather than just assuming everyone has it and acting like everyone is, I think personally, once again, all my opinion, not a medical expert, just a dude with an opinion, that's all I am. But I think we would do a lot more positive, it would be a much more positive action for society in the United States as a whole to actually find out and start creating some studies on who has immunity to the disease right now and how we can actually rebuild a system of infrastructure and try and rejuvenate our economy a little bit by actually letting people go back to work, or even rethinking the fact that is an 18 or 17-year-old who is, very close to being quote unquote perfectly healthy, are they really doing much good by staying home and not working or not going to school? I'm very much still not convinced on if the solution is in fact, I believe the solution right now is in fact worse than the issue. The amount of American culture, which we've talked about on this podcast, is already predisposed to being sick, sad, and depressed. Unfortunately, that's just the truth that we live in. What's going to happen when we lock them indoors in apartments for 6 months at a time? I think that's ludicrous. This has never happened in history, ever.
Yeah.
Not even close. I mean, this is in fact, the first time in history that social distancing has been not just encouraged, but very close to being enforced by government authorities. And I think that's also a bit of an issue itself. Is we need to start thinking outside the box right now. I know for a fact that you own a restaurant, or you own a bar, or you own a nightclub, or a store, or any kind of a business that relies heavily on human interaction, they're very much at risk of going under right now, because if a restaurant's serving 50 to 100 people a day with takeout meals, well, do you think people are going to buy filet mignons for takeout meals? No, they're buying cheap burgers that cost $8, and they're still going to tip $4 or so. I mean, if you really think about it, capitalism is not going to thrive. I'm not saying it's impossible for capitalism to thrive in this environment, but it's definitely not conducive to a capitalist society.
Well, I
And I'm
think
not
it's
saying
going to change. It's going to change what people want. So it's not going to change whether or not capitalism thrives. It's just going to change what resources will thrive.
yes. It's not necessarily capitalism itself, but it's more of a capitalist system, and the practicality of that, of small businesses pretty much being the backbone of the United States economy. I mean, the reason why people migrated to the U.S. in the first place in the past 50 to 100 years was because of the opportunity for business, to open businesses, to buy and sell, to trade. That's one of the major attractions of living in the U.S. And right now, that's very much in hindrance, because of both the government and social mandates right now, and overall fear as a whole. I hate to say it, but I can see how it can become, how limited government, the claim about limited government being a positive, not only by the conservative party, but also by the libertarian party, both of which seem to believe in some form of limited government as far as how much interaction and or direction is allowed between the government and the regular society. After this whole thing's over, it's going to be very easy for people to claim, oh, well, you guys needed us during this crisis, so what makes you think limited government's going to work in the future if you guys needed us so much during the COVID-19 epidemic? That's not to be a conspiracy theorist. It's not to spread any kind of a, I guess, a revolutionary mindset. That's not really what I'm promoting here, but I definitely do want to do more than think inside the regular box. When you see people walking around Walmart with rubber gloves and cloth masks, homemade, it makes you really rethink the mindset of the American public as a whole on how much knowledge do we have of health, how much knowledge do we have of prevention, and can we think, I guess, more or less on our own instead of constantly falling to Fox News and CNN and just saying, okay, tell me, Big Brother, what I should do next. And I think the more we fall into that mindset, the more desperate and fearful we're going to be as a whole.
I think you're going to get some people who will do what you're saying, right? They'll go out and seek the proper information. And then you'll have another people who are too afraid, right? They don't want to risk anything. So they don't trust themselves, right? So they'll go out and seek information that everybody seems to agree with. And again, like you're saying, you're not being a conspiracy theorist. You're just trying to look at the data. And the people who look at the data are generally not as afraid as the people who are more afraid. And that's just the reality in which we live in. Like no matter in what circumstance, right? Um, we usually acquire the knowledge that we want to quell our fears, and that's what we're doing right now. There are some people who are reaching for conspiracy theories in order to quell their fears about what's going on, and that's just what's going to happen. Um, I can see that there might be a shift towards more evidence-based information, but there might also be a shift towards non-evidence-based information, just because of the fact that we're in this crisis and people respond differently to crises depending on their personalities. So it's going to be a mix, as it always is.
Yeah, and I think more importantly than just simply reading data, I think having some kind of a basic understanding of what data really is paramount right now to a productive reaction to the pandemic, right? That we're currently living in. It's very, very frustrating when you see newscasters and government officials going on live television and spitting out numbers that you know for a fact they don't know about themselves. They're regurgitating what they've been told or what they're reading in a prompt right in front of them. If you don't understand how a test is done and you didn't read the limitations of that test and you didn't actually read the abstract or the conclusion, then be very careful what numbers you're pulling from, because every single one of these claims that you see on Facebook floating around, this percentage is doing this, that percentage is doing that. And when you see these numbers, start looking at your works cited areas, which unfortunately on a Facebook meme doesn't exist. So maybe we should start rethinking where we're getting our information. If it's just some, blank purple page with white letters talking about statistics on Facebook, think twice before you believe what that's saying. That shit could be 2 months old or not true at all. But I guarantee this, if a well-known person were to post some random numbers on Facebook without any works cited or any credibility, it would still be widely believed by their followers because people don't like to question authority. And now we need to question authority more than ever.
Yeah, I agree. There are a couple problems here. Like one, like you're saying, like we need to read the methods section of the paper so we can establish context from which to base our conclusions. The second problem is that the information is in academia, right? So in order to understand it, you actually need to go to someone with the authority and the base knowledge, who conducted the study, right? So no matter what, you're relying on some sort of authority. You're relying on some sort of information that someone is telling you. Um, and again, the more that you understand about methodology, the better. But there's always limitations to that. And most people, they will never read a research paper in their life, you know. So I think authority is extremely important. We just have to know which authority to trust here. And I personally don't know because I'm not an epidemiologist. I mean, I have no idea, what's going on. So I just stick with WHO and then base my conclusions off that.
Yeah. Um, I think if we were to publicize reliable information coming from epidemiologists or just very knowledgeable doctors who have a public health awareness to them, like Dr. Mike on YouTube or Dr. Fauci, who is now talking to town. Even if we made these gentlemen more public, I think even that would give the American public some sense of ease because at least what they're hearing is true.
And the other
I,
important point, though, is the way they communicate information,
yes.
right? They'll use a bunch of different terms like it depends. Well, in this situation, here's what happened. And this percentage of the population did something, but this percentage of the population didn't, right? They're always like putting their statements in context, right? And that's the most important thing. Like when you're looking for someone who seems reliable, if they're not putting their information in context, if they're not providing valid reasons and evidence to back up their conclusions, that's a problem, and you should probably avoid them. Like these little heuristics, like their way of speaking, that's the most important thing that you can pick up on. And that's why people like podcasts right now too. You can see like who is talking appropriately about a certain topic and putting their authority in check in a way that that what they're saying is either true or false based upon how much they know. I think that's really important now.
Yeah, I saw a YouTube video back when I was sick about which. Don't get me wrong, the video was great, but it was funny because the video itself was talking about ARDS, and if you don't know what that is, that stands for what's ARDS, acute respiratory distress syndrome, and it is basically an exacerbation and or overreaction of the epithelial lung tissue, which is the lining of the lung tissue that contains your alveoli. Anytime that becomes overloaded with edema or mucus or fluid, so to speak, like you have in pneumonia, you have a risk of experiencing acute respiratory distress syndrome. Well, what was funny about this video was that it was titled, in all caps, "How Coronavirus Kills People." And you watch the video, and it's a lecture, a medical lecture done with illustrations. Don't get me wrong, very well done. But the lecture itself was coming from, or the citation itself was coming from a well-known topic of acute respiratory distress syndrome that has been known for probably the past, I'd say at least 10 to 15 years. I would go as far to say that. I don't really know if that's a fact, how long we've actually deemed this as a medical phenomenon or a pathophysiological issue, but it exists and it has existed long before coronavirus has. And what I didn't like about this article or this YouTube video per se was the fact that they're trying to make a claim that coronavirus attacks the lung tissue, that if you get coronavirus, you are doomed to experience this. And that's not the case, because if you get coronavirus, you are unfortunately doomed to experience no symptoms for some people, very mild symptoms for other people. You can be an 101-year-old grandma in Italy and actually overcome it, believe it or not. Do you think she lived a perfect life and never smoked and never lived in a bad environment? Highly doubtful. She's an elderly person living in Italy. She probably didn't live some kind of a perfect lifestyle. Every human body is different, and every human body is going to experience a disease differently. People don't produce the same symptoms with cancer. They don't produce the same symptoms with colds or flus. Like I said, if it remains dormant in your body or you remain asymptomatic as a whole, you can still spread it, of course, but you're not going to experience acute respiratory distress syndrome because you're asymptomatic. Yes, it lives in the nasal passages. It houses itself, well, I'm not going to say it does or it doesn't, but it's thought to be a conducive environment to coronavirus to be living within the lung tissue. So it's very probable. We don't know that for a fact yet, but it's very likely. Coronavirus, yes. The same coronavirus that produced Middle Eastern respiratory syndrome and severe acute respiratory syndrome, SARS and MERS. That was coronavirus too. This is a different strain of the coronavirus. The best way we can understand the current COVID-19 or coronavirus or SARS-CoV-2, as it's called right now, is to look at what the other coronavirus issues produced in the human physiological system. On the topic of ARDS, very quickly, it's very simply thought of as an acute or a very quick buildup of edema, which is liquid or swelling of the lung tissue, where the alveoli sacs, you have about 600 million of these sacs within your lungs, become overloaded with liquid, fluid, mucus, water, etc. A substance really of a mix of those things. Um, what is actually happening is you hear the term drowning. If you take lung sounds, you can hear the person, so to speak, drowning in this lung fluid. What's really being coined here when you hear that term is the fact that because the alveoli sacs are so full of fluid, you can't adequately exchange gases within the tissues. So you can't basically exhale your carbon dioxide, your CO2, you can't appropriately inhale oxygen. You can't perfuse the rest of the body's tissues, so you're not getting enough oxygen saturation binding the hemoglobin within the bloodstream, and it's not perfusing the cells in the entire body the way a healthy person does. The reason why is because you have a very large buildup of edema in the lung tissue. Keep in mind, these alveolar sacs are extremely small, very small, but you have about 600 million of them. So they really cover the entire lung body in general. Now, whether or not the alveoli sacs themselves are comprised of epithelial tissue, that would be something I would definitely be willing to look into. I can't cite that for sure, so I'm not gonna bank on that topic. But whatever tissue itself that it's comprised of is susceptible to being worn out. So if you have this constant edema, it's basically putting a constant stretch on the lung tissue. And then when it finally does relax, imagine a balloon being overinflated and then being relaxed and feeling kind of a floppy, dead type feeling to it. So when you hear statements about the coronavirus taking over, per se, the lung tissue, this is really what they're talking about in most contexts, to my knowledge, or this is what I've interpreted at least. Feel free to look this up yourself. Look up what acute respiratory distress syndrome is. Look up how that occurs in coronavirus patients, and look up the video itself if you guys would like. Now, the issue itself of acute respiratory distress syndrome exists in patients with the flu. It exists in patients with colds. It exists in patients with COPD. It can happen in almost all severe respiratory infections, or a simple severe respiratory exacerbation. You don't need to be infected per se. This may be environmental. You may have been living in a mold infested environment, which produced an allergen, so you have acute allergies per se that may have turned into a pneumonia type response. Obviously, in the geriatric population, this is very risky for them because really any kind of an infection or any kind of a severe immune response is going to be to a degree harmful the older you get. That's why we're testing people who are 60 and above. So like I said, I have no intention of downplaying the coronavirus itself, but when you hear headlines saying, you know, this is what like National Geographic did this, I believe, way back in January. They made a claim that, you know, this is how coronavirus takes over and lives inside the lung tissue. And the article itself was describing ARDS. Well, like I said before, this is a manifestation of lung disease. This is not a manifestation of specifically coronavirus or specifically COVID-19. This has been known for a long time. We can't make statements about the symptoms of coronavirus until we actually have a much better understanding of it. And right now it's very limited. If you think about scientific research as a whole, how much do we know about the flu right now? A lot. How much do we know about colds? A lot. How much do you know about SARS? A good amount. How much do you know about SARS-CoV-2? Not very much, because it's really only been in the public eye for 4 to 6 months. That's why. So we can't pretend to make these topics up. And moreover, really we rethink why someone says what they're saying. If you have a headline that makes a scary, so to speak, statement or unnecessarily bold statement, they want you to click on it. So think outside the box a little bit here. Think about, okay, what do they want from me? They probably want me to think more and click on the rest of their articles because that's how they make money. They need views. They need to be in the public eye. Same thing with the news. Same thing with unreliable information on YouTube or Instagram, social media. Be careful who gets into this stuff. That was a very brief rundown on the exacerbation or the manifestation that gets produced in the pathophysiology of lung disease. And I like that stuff. It's pretty cool to me. It's a very interesting topic to study, and I recommend that we all do that, because the more we understand about what the coronavirus does to some people, the more we can understand, okay, that's why people 16 and above are at risk. That's why smokers are at risk. That's why COPD patients are at risk. Well, it makes sense then. It makes perfect sense. That's why, quarterback football star next door isn't as high a risk. Yes, have some 18-year-olds died? Yes, that has happened. But he's still not as high at risk. Okay, he's still not in as much danger as Gretna, who lives down the street and is 85 years old and has COPD. That's very much public information, and you don't need to be college educated. You don't need to be a medical professional to understand that. So if we get all one of our viewers, if they get anything from this podcast, I would, at least from me, I would like them to study up on their own independent information on basic pathophysiology, basic physiology itself of disease processes of coronavirus and those that are similar to it.
Yeah, you did a good job. Unfortunately, we can't have like a test that people have to take before they put out this information.
Yeah.
That would be great,
Instagram booty model, and you're putting out information. Stay in your fucking lane. Don't pretend to be something that you're not. No. That's why we always preface what we're saying by, we're just two guys with opinions. We don't have credentials. We're not trying to give some kind of crazy medical advice. We're just talking. Okay, that's all we're fucking doing.
We have some credentials, but they're very, very limited.
Yes, they're very limited.
They're specific to fitness.
Yeah, and if fitness and health, but if your job, let's be honest, is to pose on Instagram, then you shouldn't be talking about a topic that you, in my opinion, almost have no business really discussing. If you're putting out numbers, statistics, claims on your social media that aren't true, that you either are making up or finding from unreliable sources, you run the risk of causing more panic. And the other thing is the celebrities all singing songs together on Instagram or on YouTube, was like they collaborate and they all sing.
What was that?
Oh, it was Imagine by that one, John Lennon, I think. I don't know. Either way, I saw that a couple of weeks ago, and then I think it was Fox. Actually, no, it was CNN. Was like, this is such a beautiful message to spread to all the people. Positivity. It's like, this isn't World War One. This isn't World War II. Stop thinking that it is. Yes, people are dying. Yes, it's dangerous. But this isn't 9/11 either. Is this comparable to the 9/11 of our generation? Maybe. It's comparable in the fact that it can change our lives, but it's not as devastating. We're not being attacked. Okay. When you meet someone who's British and experienced, getting bombed by the Nazis during World War II and had to, stay at home in bomb shelters for weeks and weeks on end, respect that, and don't compare the fact that we're living through a pandemic to that issue. Like, are some aspects comparable? Yeah, but let's stop trying to make the woe is me. I just
you know what I hate. Like I hate especially is like people comparing this to like the obesity epidemic.
Yeah,
that really like pisses me off. You're right. Yeah, people make false comparisons to things to make it seem like either A, it's super bad, or
Yeah.
B, it's not bad enough, right?
Right.
And it's its own thing, you know. It's its own thing. It's an emerging phenomena. We're still learning about it.
It's a fully independent issue.
Yeah.
But the cops and firefighters and security staff who are running into buildings to save people, priests running in to save people during 9/11 deserve the credit that they deserve, frankly speaking,
Yeah.
because of the actions they took during a time of violence, a time of, an introduction to war. But that's not a pandemic. So I don't want to go as far to say it's to compare the two. I don't want to say that necessarily, but I just disagree with the general statement that this is comparable to World War One or World War Two, where that the American public is being just as much heroic as the 18-year-olds that enlisted during those major conflicts. I just don't. I don't like the way that sounds, and it rubs me the wrong way, I guess. It's just the best way I can put it.
Yeah, because there's a moral element to that, to war, right? There's no moral element to a pandemic, right? It just happened, you
Yeah,
know.
we have to practice what we have to practice, social distance and all that stuff. But we don't have a choice, really. We're not choosing to do this. So, you know, it's like face it, because that's the only chance you really have.
Yeah,
But
it's like a hurricane.
yes, you just got to deal with it.
Yeah,
The guys who are storming, the beaches of Normandy or not beaches of Normandy. Please edit that out. But yeah,
can't edit this one.
you can't. No, that's pretty embarrassing. But yeah, the guys who were storming the beaches during D-Day deserve a lot more credit because they fucking chose to be there, and they had to be brave because that was their profession, that was their job
Yeah,
at that place. Right now, we're fucking staying at home. We just have to deal with it. It is what it is, frankly. Um, but we're not getting shot at or attacked. So that's just my pet peeve vent, I guess.
yeah, that was a long ass event.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was good. Like that.
How long that lasted.
Probably a good 30-35 minutes. So, and we had some other topics to discuss. So, you're still training normally, right?
Close to normally. I guess about as normal as it can be. It's right now. It's a push pull legs hypertrophy type approach, and the reason why I'm doing that is because there are going to be some days where I don't have access to a gym, and I might need to use just body weight, and doing several hundred lunges, for example, will be sufficient for a leg day, just like squatting 225 pounds for sets of 10 is going to be sufficient. High reps right now is the goal. So
Are you seriously doing like hundreds of lunges?
not right now. Now I'm just saying if I didn't have a squat rack, that's what I would
Okay.
do. 100, 200 or whatever, 400 meters worth,
Yeah.
etc. But that's just as good of a workout, if you ask me, as doing a high rep uh, workout with external weights. That's more the comparison I'm making here. I have bands and all that I can use. So training, to be honest, isn't changing that much. Besides the fact that I went from training for powerlifting meet to training for hypertrophy. Right now, it's hypertrophy just because
Your
that's
meet
relevant.
got canceled?
What's that?
Your meet get canceled?
Yeah. There's no meet right now. There's no way they can have it in May, so it's postponed, unfortunately. But I did meet a PR 2 or 3 weeks ago. I squatted 315, front squatted 315 for 5 reps. Um, 5 clean reps, ass to grass. Never done that before. Never even close to do that before. I've front squatted 335 in high school for 1 rep. but I've never actually repped 315 in the front rack position. So I'm very happy about that. But definitely be willing to see where I can go. I'm not stopping by any means.
Yeah, for sure. Sure. When gym's open, you can just pick it back up.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
How's the training changed?
I'm just doing body weight, man.
Yeah.
Yeah. I got like sets of up to 50-pound dumbbells.
Right.
But to be honest with you, I don't really use them. Like everything is just body weight. I've been working on handstands. I've been doing like Nordic hamstring curls. I've been doing like weird like leg exercises that are just incredibly difficult.
Yeah.
And I have no idea why. But I did this thing yesterday. I was training with Claudia, and I just decided like, so we did Nordics, and I was gonna do like a pistol variation. So I just decided to do a pistol squat to a curtsy pistol, and then to like a lunge without my foot touching the ground.
Huh.
And
And
I just keep cycling through those three things until I went to failure, and then I just switched legs.
do you really want?
That was probably one of the most difficult things I've ever done with my legs.
Yeah. Do you really want to challenge your strength in unstable type positions? Is that the goal?
No, actually the goal right now is just maintain my leg strength.
Okay.
I'm trying to get better at handstand push-ups, and then I'm trying to get a planche,
Nice.
which is just brutal.
Yeah.
Like I hate planche push-ups. Like those are the worst things. Like if you're looking for like a push-up variation that will just destroy you, do a planche
Right.
push-up. Because yeah, it doesn't get harder than that unless you do like a handstand push-up, and those
Yeah.
are also pretty difficult. But yeah, that's what I'm up to right now, and I'm making sure I'm going pretty close to failure. Not trying to go to failure every time, but maybe like leaving like 2 or 3 reps left in the tank usually. I think a big mistake that most people will make during this whole quarantine situation is just doing a bunch of circuit training with their body weight and not taking anything close to failure.
Yeah.
I mean, it's obviously better than nothing, but that's just a huge problem. And I don't know what it is, like whether it's they're just afraid to push themselves or they don't know any better, and it's probably a combination of the two, right? But that's what I'm doing right now, and the whole training to failure thing is pretty interesting for me at the moment because I've had to do more of that as I've shifted to body weight.
Yeah. One thing I've really picked up on is the fact that, like, before I was far more active, really, generally speaking, than I was now. Even with school, I was at the fire academy twice a week. I was training heavy 3 days a week. That was it. But then running calls on the days I wasn't at school, I was running calls. So that could include night calls. I was coaching wrestling on top of all that. So I was just busy as hell, maintained a very steady weight, and ate whatever the fuck I wanted to eat. Right? That was really my entire November, some of December, January, and February. That's pretty much how it was. And then this whole, this shit went down, and I'm far more sedentary now than I was before. So I have made a goal of almost contrary to what I guess you just said. Not like contrary to it, but once I describe the goal, I guess it'll make much sense. But
Are you
my
just
leg,
bulking?
what's that?
Are you bulking?
I would say that I am definitely on a caloric surplus, and my goal is to definitely gain increased mass and size. But my means of accomplishing that is a little bit different than what I've done in the past. So every leg day, which is twice a week, I do 2 main movements, which is usually a back squat, high rep back squat, 8 to 10 reps, and a set, not supersetted, but after the exercise is completed, I do trap bar deadlifts along with shrugs. So I'm not going to do a trap bar deadlift with a weight that I can't shrug. So it's relatively light, but also for pretty high reps, 8 to 10 reps, touch and go, usually no bounce. But then I go into a leg circuit, and I usually do 3 rounds of 3 exercises, and that could be, anything: glute ham raises, lunges, RDLs, jump squats. All that shit can be part of it. Not necessarily going to failure, but definitely pushing.
I think the combination of all of those, right, is because you're doing them in a circuit, you're taking them somewhere to failure.
Right. I'm definitely taking it to failure to a point.
They're all leg movements. Like if you did, for example, like a total body circuit, right, you probably wouldn't be taking those to failure. But since you're doing something where it's a combination, I can see that.
Definitely. If it was involved in, if I was more involved in, like wrestling practice twice a week, 3 days a week, then I would definitely have to program for that. But right now, if it's leg day, I do take it pretty far. I go definitely pretty hard. If I'm feeling good and I slept pretty well, then and I'm eating, then I'm gonna fucking lay it pretty close to balls to the wall. Same thing with my back days, which is my pull days and my push days. On my push and pull days, I do an actual cardio circuit with the assault bike, sandbags, sledgehammer. I also superset all my accessory movements. So the goal really is just to stay not sedentary during my workouts, because while I was running the bridge and I was running the Texas method after that for the past 4 months, really, I took a long time between each set. It was just relaxing, but each set was pretty fucking heavy, and I would go, I would go hard on each set, but I would take long rest periods. Right now, I'm not taking long rest periods, usually like a minute or two, and then it's a lot of constant movement. And that's just because I know I'm not going to stop eating. I'm still going to eat, and I want to, gain as much size and mass as I can. Right now, we have to keep in mind that to a degree, muscle endurance is synonymous with hypertrophy. So high reps, obviously, if you're getting a pump and you're doing high reps, if you're doing, if I were to take the front squat or back squat right now, put 225 on the bar and do a max set and say, I don't know, I did 30 reps. Okay. Yeah, that's muscle endurance, but that pump is going to be pretty fucking insane. So that's something I think we often forget, at least in the old school train of thought, where high reps was somehow better than bodybuilding, when that's really what bodybuilding is.
Right, you're also taking it close to failure when you're doing that. I think, like you're saying, most people, I think, who are in like this evidence-based fitness community, whatever, most people know now that you can go outside the 8 to 12 rep range for hypertrophy and still make some serious gains, provided that you go very close to failure. And it makes sense too, right? Because sure, like you're saying, muscle endurance, you're recruiting a bunch of slow twitch muscle fibers as in the beginning of the set, right? But as you get towards the end, you start recruiting more fast twitch and high threshold motor units, which will then drive hypertrophy. So I think that makes perfect sense to what you're talking about. Just like going back to that original point, like most people, like general pop people will not understand that. Like I had a girl like ask me like whether she can get thicker by by doing a bunch of cardio, right? But going on a slight incline.
Yeah, so there's no eccentric portion to that exercise, so the answer would be
it's less valuable, and even more so, it's not very intense. So there's a lot of problems there.
Yeah, that would be a big, thick no for me, dog.
Oh yeah.
Um,
But
yeah,
we have the secrets to getting thick,
yeah. The secret to getting thick is eccentric movement. You have to have some kind of that negative portion. Let's just touch on that real quick.
Yeah.
Um, sled dragging, sledgehammer swinging, medicine ball throwing, sandbag throwing, Olympic weightlifting. That stuff is great, like very good for what it is, but it's not bodybuilding, and it's not conducive to building size and strength.
You can
So,
definitely build some though with it. It's just not as good.
yeah, it's not gonna. Okay, I guess scientifically speaking, it's not going to recruit as much activation of the overall muscular tissue as a slow. If I'm trying to bulk up my shoulders, or okay, if I'm just trying to bulk up my arms, doing up to my arms to some degree, but just shouldering a med ball is a metabolic conditioning exercise. It's made to spike the heart rate for intervals, not necessarily to bulk up your arms. Likewise, if I'm doing uh, bicep curls, but I drop the weight at the top of every curl, but I'm not getting the negative portion of it, then I'm not going to get as high of a recruitment of the muscle fibers as if I were to do a slow or relatively slow negative. But I'm not saying those are bad exercises, because there's no such thing as a bad exercise. If you can do it, and if you know what you're doing it for, it's not a bad exercise. It just depends on what you're doing it for. If you told me that you were trying to get your 30 pounds to your squat or deadlift or bench, and you were doing those exercises exclusively, then I would question your methods. Um, but it all depends on the goal.
Exactly. Yep. I've also been experimenting with getting thick for the past 2 years,
Yeah,
and it's worked.
sure, aren't you?
Yeah, I'm much bigger.
200?
What?
What are you weighing like right now? 200?
185.
Wow, that's about the same as me.
Yeah,
It's the
yeah.
first time, and
Mm-hmm.
doesn't happen often.
No, took me a
No,
while, bro.
yeah,
But anyway, I've been experimenting with getting thicker, and like you're saying, eccentrics are extremely valuable. I like personally, um, I enjoy tempo movements,
yeah,
or, especially on like tempo lunges for for my ass. Like that's like the movement where I feel my butt the most. Tempo lunges are my go-to, and then like other movements would be like front-loaded assisted pistols, like where I'm sorry, front-loaded bench pistols, where you have like a barbell or two dumbbells in a rack position, right? And then you're just touching your butt down on a bench and squatting back up on one leg.
yeah.
Those two, like I've made like serious gains from those two exercises. Like there's some value to the hip thrust too. Um,
Absolutely.
but I think those two movements should come before the hip thrust, because I see the hip thrust as like something where you can add a lot of volume really quickly because it's not very fatiguing, right? Whereas like a squat, a lunge, right, a pistol they're seriously fatiguing exercises. Um, so I think those should come first before people add in the hip thrust. The
Yeah.
mistake most people make with this is that they just do the hip thrust and they don't do any other leg movement. Like I'll see a bunch of girls in the gym just literally doing hip thrusts but not squatting at all. Like
Awesome.
you're making huge mistakes. But
But on that note, if I was to do one exercise for my lower body, it would be if I could do it and had the access to it, barbell squat, hands down.
yeah,
Without if
yeah,
I had it available to me and I had the health to perform it appropriately, that's what I would be doing.
yeah.
Um, but like Gunnar Peterson, for example, makes the claim that the only exercise you need to do to make your appearance, only needed or required exercise to actually create a physical appearance that is conducive to actually showing that you have a physique underneath your clothes is a lateral raise, a shoulder lateral raise, because obviously it's going to add a degree of size to your medial delts. But that's fine and dandy. That's because he wants to make the claim that there is no one exercise that's going to be perfect or needed for everyone. Besides that, of course, obviously that can be argued, but he's a very good trainer with very good information.
Maybe a deadlift would do it.
I'd say so as well.
I think a deadlift might do that.
It's probably known by now that deadlifts are definitely among my go-to and favorite exercises, even though I've definitely, thrown out my back more than I would like to admit because I was deadlifting, but that usually comes down to me being an idiot, not the movement being wrong. So that's definitely a topic or a statement that I'm going to avoid ever saying, is that an exercise is at fault, because usually it's not at fault. It's usually how you're doing it and what you're doing it and why you're doing it.
Yeah.
That leads to injury, not so much the exercise itself. Because if you pick up a pin off the ground, you're doing a deadlift. So it doesn't really matter, like I said, how the movement or what movement.
It's really hard. It's really hard to like change that narrative, though.
Yeah, very.
I like, the more I've been thinking about it, the more I'm like, this is like pointless, except to talk about it on our own. Besides going out and like correcting people about like, well, this isn't exactly true. Posture doesn't actually cause pain. What's really going on here? Like once you get into that whole posture topic and pain topic, like you're saying, it becomes religion, because like people are so bound up by pain, right? There's such a moral component to it that people are going to get hostile.
Especially if it's your way to make a living.
Oh yeah.
If it's an issue like posture, then it's not going to be pretty when it gets attacked.
Yeah.
That's just a fact of life.
Yeah, I think that's the harder thing about pain, though, is just like measuring it.
Yeah.
Right. It's like I feel like most people just don't even know exactly what pain is. Right. They interpret their experience very uniquely. And
yeah.
Honestly, most scientists don't even know what pain is. And we don't know what pain is either.
and since we're on that topic, shout out to one of my boys here at school. He has his own podcast. We'll put it in the show notes, but I feel like I should know it. We'll put it in the show notes. Anyway, a physical therapy student, doctor of physical therapy student, along with there's two of them, and they both actually talk about the topic of pain. And we've talked extensively in the gym together about the topic of pain. And my friend has mentioned that pain is one of the most subjective and individual experiences that the human body can ever experience. No two people can experience the same amount of pain or the same individual, or it's the same extensive, I guess you could say, feeling that whatever issue is causing this inflammation, this pain, or this buildup. Because it can come in the form of anxiety, it can come in the form of how you're eating, how you're sleeping, how you're living, how you're moving. All that does affect your quote unquote pain experience. And whether you are the richest person in the world or the poorest person in the world, healthiest, unhealthiest, you're going to experience pain. And whether that's emotional pain or it's physical pain or it's both, because crazy enough, they're very, very similar.
Yep.
Been extensive research on breakups and how a bad breakup or withdrawal, because that's really what a breakup is. It's
Right.
very similar to a drug withdrawal. Is shown on a relatively objective scale that it's very much similar to experiencing physical injury, the level of pain on a physiological level. Now, can I reference this study? No. Can I reference how this test was done? No. But let's just say it is very comparable, and I would encourage the listeners to read further into it. I'm not going to claim to be an expert, just like I've done with anything, but I would definitely encourage this phenomenon to be researched by the listeners, because boy, is it fascinating. And if you think you're a non-compassionate person and you want to gain some compassion or empathy in your day-to-day life, then research this topic, because I think it'll give you that much more of how tough you think you are. There's going to be times when you better understand and humble yourself enough to not judge someone else's perception of pain. Because until you experience a bad breakup, until you experience a bad injury, until you experience depression or anxiety, to walk in and judge someone else's and to say it's not credible is it's irresponsible, especially if you work in a setting that's your job. Even if you're a coach, and boy, could we podcast for hours about philosophy of coaching in general, but if you have an athlete or a student that is experiencing some form of pain or suffering on, an individual level, yes, it's going to be frustrating as hell for a coach. You need to understand that you don't get it. You don't know how they feel. So you need to have that empathy. Don't let it affect their performance that much. If you can help it, help them understand that this feeling doesn't need to affect their performance. If it's emotional, obviously. If it's physical, you got to be different. Help them understand not to let pain control their life, but also understand that, for a high school kid or a middle school kid, this is everything to them. Whatever, whether that be that, them experiencing hardship in school or, bad grades or hard time with the class, whatever it is, that's the world right now. So you better understand that and think in their box, not in yours.
Yeah. I agree with that. And you have to make sure that people understand that they do have control over some aspects of their pain experience, right? You don't have control over whether someone stabs you, right? That's a given. But you do have control over your psychological and your social influences that might contribute to the pain experience. And you do have some control of your biological. So like some psychological would be like catastrophizing, like thinking something is or will be apparent or manifest itself, but in actuality, it probably will never happen, right? So, I mean, there are benefits to catastrophizing, right? It could help you get things done, but there are also drawbacks, like the pain experience. We know that catastrophizing is highly correlated to the pain experience. The more you catastrophize, the worse your pain outcomes, especially in chronic low back pain. That's not for everyone. There are two different types of catastrophizing. There would be like dispositional and situational. Dispositional is more like a general thing, your way of catastrophizing. Situational really depends on the context in which you're in, and usually situational is that's the more important one. But regardless, catastrophizing can be an example, and you can control that. And that's the same thing with social influences too, right? So family related pain outcomes. How often do you spend around people who are in pain, right? Because that will influence your own subjective experience by making you more aware of your own pain sensations. So that would be another thing. And then there's some research on sex differences in pain, which is also pretty interesting and kind of I'm kind of skeptical about it because of the way they measure pain in all of these studies, but especially sex differences. So there's some research that suggests that women experience more pain outcomes than men. And there's like two different ways of looking at that. There would be like biological differences, right? So they're more likely to experience pain in certain stages of their menstrual cycle. And then there would be like social learning. And then there's the theory that women are more adept at interpreting social cues, right? So that would lead them to see and experience more pain experiences than men. So those are like some serious factors, psychosocial factors, which contribute to the pain experience. And
Yeah.
then you have the whole idea of like measuring pain, which is just freaking impossible. And it really like it frustrates the hell out of me when people like make pain claims and then you see the study they looked at and then you see how they measured pain, and it was just maybe it was like maybe it was tissue damage, right? So maybe it wasn't actually pain. Maybe it was a brain signal, right, which we know isn't reliable at all. So there's like a lot of different things going on here in this whole world of pain. um, yeah, I like you, I encourage people to look at that more because it's really interesting.
Yeah. It's funny how certain topics and ideas that we've talked about for years now, since high school, really, uh, they don't change. That the opinion on subjectivity, not subjectivity. Well, yeah, the subjective experience of pain, for example, whether that be emotional or physical, will always be individual, and um, to make a classification of a mass statement or a blanket statement on an issue like this is it's not. I'm not going to go as far as say it's irresponsible because sometimes you need to do it. It does need to be done at times, but boy, does it make a big difference when you actually view it as okay, this is a individual experience that I don't feel and I don't understand, yet I'm going to attempt to help. That's the much better mindset than saying, oh, that's the same that I see with every other client, or every other kid that I coach. So, they're all the same. Now, yes, is the treatment the same or is the mindset addressing it the same sometimes? Fuck yeah, it is. Yes, absolutely. Sometimes you do just need to say buck up and move on. That is 100% feasible at times. It depends on the issue. And if there's a deeper issue more than what the person's claiming. But if it's a muscle soreness issue because you were detrained and you got sore from your recovery day and you have a game the next day, sorry, Buttercup, get in the game. You're not injured. Go
Yeah.
play. So that needs to be said. That's a conversation that needs to be said. Um, if it comes to your level of passion or general desire to be in a certain place or on the mat or on the field, it needs to be there. It doesn't really matter. Sometimes it doesn't matter what you're going through. You just got to bring it some days. I think that if that's, if the treatment per se to some pain experiences in athletes was at times just putting your foot in their rear, it needs to happen. But there's also times to pull the reins back. There's also times to recommend them to a higher level of treatment, like a psychologist or a physical therapist. But this isn't something that we can generally make a statement on and say, this is what you do for every person, patient, or client or athlete that experiences blank. Keep that in mind.
Now I'm going to counter you with two examples as to where we actually need some objective measure.
Yeah, yeah.
One, we need an objective measure of pain because how the hell do you tell if a baby is experiencing pain besides like collecting its tears? Right? So that would be one example. Another example would be in a legal sense, right? So how do you verify that someone is actually in pain if they're in court, right? Not very reliable. So again, you'd need some objective measure of pain.
That 100%. I do agree that we need objective measures. Um,
I don't think it's ever going to happen though. A
yeah,
way that it could is that you could find like a neural correlate to pain, right? So you take a bunch of people in pain, you look at their brains and you see what matches up. The problem is that we haven't found anything yet, and I really doubt you're going to find anything because of all these different like top-down mechanisms that influence the pain experience. Like you're saying, it's so variable that you're probably not going to get one, even if we could try with our best effort,
yeah,
which is unfortunate, but I mean that's the human experience.
yeah, and that's one of those topics that could always be continued on. But I think you hit the nail on the head with that.
Yeah, I, I think that's it for me for pain. That's my rant. That's my rant. You had COVID. Pain is mine. So
I
we're
think,
good. We're good.
well, I think as far as future topics go, uh, in our very brief knowledge and understanding of the topic of coaching, but one that we do have some experience in, we should talk about next.
Yeah.
Is with dealing with disagreeable athletes, philosophies with alter egos. Do you want your personality, their true personality, to be the same personality you coach with? That's highly debatable. um, do you need to be a bit more of a hard ass than a compassionate player in that athlete's life? That's very subjective to each coach.
Yeah.
I would definitely love to get viewpoints on the mindsets of the coaches that we've had the pleasure of learning from. Um, but I think for a following podcast, that would be a really good,
I
I
think we
guess.
can definitely do that.
Well,
I'm podcasting with Claudia next week. We're gonna do some youth training series on
sweet.
how to train youth athletes. So that should
Yep.
be interesting. And that should be about coaching a bit, but like what you're saying we're probably not going to cover. So probably have to get some leadership books and read up on that.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing.
Or we can just speak from personal experience.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that
It's
might be
very,
better. Some like the more I read, the more I don't like my mind being like infested by different ideas. It confuses the hell out of me. And I don't like it at all, bro. It's so frustrating.
they contradict each other. I mean, yeah. Go and research dating coaches. It's the same thing. Okay, powerlifting coaches, same thing. Hypertrophy, same. I mean, there's always contradicting information. Um,
Bro, dating coaches is probably the worst.
bullshit because it's a
Like
topic
you're
that's
saying, it's like
subjective,
yeah.
but that's one that like even Elliot Hulse is touching on a lot right now, and it's like he's
Stay in
got
your
some,
lane.
and he
Stay in your
very
lane.
much was Christian perspectives and ideologies, very much so.
Yeah.
Um, let alone he might very well be a Christian now. I don't really know, but if you look at his most recent interviews and podcasts, yeah, he's very much leaning towards a pro-masculine, pro-father as the head of the family mindset. That's very much synonymous with Catholic and Christian ideologies and how marriage and family should be constructed. Don't know what happened. Like I said, he really evolves in an interesting way. I will say that.
Dude, like some of the stuff he does though,
Yeah, yeah, controversial.
yeah.
But it's definitely
He was with Paul Check for a while.
was with them, but right now a lot of the stuff that he says would contradict a lot of what Paul Chek has
Yeah,
taught.
I'm sure.
But Paul Chek made him.
Yeah.
We acknowledge the fact that, probably one of the most famous disciples of Paul Chek was Elliot Holtz. How that mindset changed from New Age to Christianity, so well, it wasn't quickly. This was over years and years of
Yeah.
very, very much so. I mean, I was working at the country club when Elliot Holtz first started making this shift. So it's been 2-3 years since this has happened.
Mm-hmm. Dude, it's crazy. Like, I sometimes I wish I could just go back and like change things. Most people say they don't want to change things. I want to go back and change things.
What would you want to change?
Wish I didn't. I wish I didn't study as much. I wish I experienced things more. I wish I had that aspect to speak from, because I'm learning that that's actually an easier way to communicate points.
Yeah,
No, it's much more difficult to communicate your thoughts when you've read them from a book
yeah,
versus when you've experienced them.
yeah. True wisdom is experience. Intelligence is not from experience, and knowledge, it depends on how you want to define it, is not always from experience. You can be very, very knowledgeable about a topic that you have no experience with,
Yeah,
for sure. So,
yeah, completely agree. All right, should we end it?
send it.
Sweet. All right, thanks for tuning in. Our IG is, well, my IG is at Maddie_lit to lift. Next IG is, you keep changing it, bro.
I had
So
a, had a fun time. Yeah, I think mine is just Nick Servey. All one word.
you went from all of these like different ones just to like
Well,
just Nick Servey, just to go back to the original name that
it
you
was
started with.
having fun with it. I thought it was really hilarious. Somehow I think I got like hacked or something. So like I was getting tagged and all this shit. And I was like, well, fuck it, I'm just gonna mess around. So I changed
I like Nikki the Serve. You should have
that
done. You should have kept that though.
too.
All right. So if you liked it, leave a 5-star rating and review. Please share with your friends and family. Hopefully you found some value in here. Hopefully we didn't confuse you too much. And that's it. See you next time.
Have a good one.